the first day I went in, because he wanted to pitch the scene to me. I went in, it was freelance. I was still working at Disney at the time. I think it was early on before Pocahontas really got going, so we had downtime. So I wanted to work with Chuck Jones. This was my only chance. So I went over to the place where he was at. It was at the old Warner studio lot there. And I'm in his office, and he says, he's sitting down, he's going through it, and he's like, well, this scene, the Roadrunner. And I'm like, yeah. But in my mind, I'm going, it's Chuck Jones. I didn't even hear a word he said. Thankfully, the scene got cut, and he gave me another one that was a scene with a huge mouse in it or whatever. But but I was so over the moon that I was actually getting pitched a scene by Chuck Jones, and it was of a coyote, it blew my mind. And at the end, I had a scene of a cell it was a Bugs Bunny cell from Bully for Bugs, original Bugs cell, and I had him sign it to me, and he says, well, don't tell Linda, she wouldn't want me to do it, but I'll do it. So he signed it to me and all that stuff. So I have actually two cells. He visited Pocahontas early on. He visited the studio, and I knew he was coming, so I brought in a Daffy Duck cell from Robin Hood Daffy.
Oh, such a good one. Right? Yeah.
So I had a cell of that, and I got him to sign that. So I have two signed Chuck Jones cells, of both, one Daffy and the other Bugs. And it's just,
Hey guys, it's your host Julian. This week I sit down with Disney legend Nik Ranieri. Nik has animated some of the greatest characters from the House of Mouse. Characters like Ursula from The Little Mermaid, Jafar from Aladdin, Lumiere from Beauty and the Beast, Hades from Hercules, Kuzco from one of my favorite movies of all time, The Emperor's New Groove. We go all over the map on this episode, touching as many of the movies and TV shows that he's worked on. It was a real blast talking with Nik and getting to hear firsthand stories about folks like Chuck Jones, Andreas Deja, Glenn Keane, and Eric Goldberg. Enjoy the show. For setting this one up, Sandra. So when I reached out to you, and I had to take a look because I knew the name, right? But I didn't know how deep your portfolio goes, right? So I Googled Nik Ranieri, and I just click on the IMDb thing, and I'm like, holy shit, Ursula. Whoa. Roger Rabbit is where we started. Then Ursula. And then you got, I'm going to just read them off. You got Lumiere, you got Jafar, you got Meko, you got Hades, you got Kuzco. And that's just the first fucking 10 years, really, when I started looking at everything. And I'm just like, dude, what is this guy has done all of the great villains of the Renaissance when it comes down to it, like Ursula. Terrifying, right? When I was a little kid, apparently this was the movie as a 1-year-old that I would just watch. Like I would have a meltdown, and I would be upset because I'm a 1-year-old baby. They would put in The Little Mermaid on VHS, maybe a couple years old, because I think we were born the same year. Little Mermaid came out in 89, so maybe 1-2 years old, somewhere around there. But they would put it in, and I would just stop. I would just be mesmerized. Maybe it's because I have red hair and Ariel had red hair. I don't know what it was. I love going back, and I've had the song for The Little Mermaid stuck in my head for the last couple of days, and I think it's because I've been listening to the Disney soundtracks. I knew I was getting ready to talk to you, and I knew the Ursula chat would come up because we actually had some fans' questions about Ursula. But kicking it off with just talking Little Mermaid for just a second, man. You guys brought in the animation renaissance. You guys brought back from the brink of extinction. I've had so many folks on from the Disney side that they said they were done with animation. Like after Black Cauldron, they kind of wanted to pull it out. And it wasn't until Roy Disney said, no, this is what we're known for. We cannot shut down the animation. I believe Tom Cito told me the story. And then Little Mermaid comes out, man, and you guys absolutely crushed it. So I got to imagine, let's take a step back there for just a second. What was it like animating Ursula, the evil witch? What was it like?
It was probably one of the toughest times of my career.
Yeah.
One of the toughest times because, well, first of all, just to go back to that animation renaissance, if you really think about it, it didn't really start with Mermaid. Up until that point, the highest grossing animated film up until that point in its first run was actually Oliver and Company.
Really?
The one before that was American Tail,
Mhm.
and that hit around like 46
Yeah.
million or something, and that was like amazing. 46, because they didn't do that back then. So I think I think Spielberg actually got the thing, put the jumper cables to animation
Yes.
in a way, and got people back into the theaters to accept it. Great Mouse Detective continued it. Oliver and Company, I think, rode on the success of those films, and Land Before Time, making animation um, um, sort of
Relevant.
cool again.
Yeah.
But you're right. It wasn't until Little Mermaid that I think the animated musical came back in a huge way. I
Yeah.
mean, say what you will about American Tail. There's only one good song in that whole film, and uh, and it wasn't until Little Mermaid. In fact, I remember being working on Roger Rabbit, and Andreas, he gave me a cassette of the soundtrack for Mermaid. He says on one side is Mermaid, and then on the other side is a demo for Aladdin. So I took it and I listened to Mermaid, and I was just like, this stuff is really good. These are really great songs. Usually, I mean, like I said, you get No Cats in America and things like that, which are not very good, but this was pretty much all the songs were solid, and I really wanted to work on this. So once Roger Rabbit was starting to wind down, despite the fact that they had a studio head come in and say, hey, your futures are assured and everyone's going to stay and we're going to keep Disney UK going and all that, I really wanted to get to Los Angeles. I had a problem because I was Canadian, so I had to work out all that. But Disney actually contacted me, and little did I know they were contacting all the people on Roger Rabbit because they're trying to get him to LA. So when I went down there, they got me the green card and all that stuff, and I started. I got put on Little Mermaid, and I thought, okay, so I looked at, I saw a rough cut of the film, and I was thinking, don't put me on Ariel, don't put me on Ariel, don't put me on Ariel. And they go, so we're going to put you on Ariel. I'm like, no.
Why didn't you want Ariel, if you don't mind me asking?
I spent about a year working on a cartoon rabbit. You got to understand that Ariel is, see, a lot of the characters are designed in a way where you have little anchor points where you could sort of figure out the shape of the character and how they would. Ariel is this, if you place an eye too low or too high in the middle of this space, that's the face, and if you don't put that mouth just right, and you don't know all the cheats that go into making certain expressions, you're gonna make a mess of it. And I did. My very first scene they gave me was Ariel in the grotto, and she's sitting there, and Triton comes in and says, so this is where you've been, and she's like, but Daddy, and so I thought, okay, looking in the mirror and I'm drawing it and I'm looking at my face and I'm putting all these lines and she looked like she was 102, and it was just awful. And thankfully the cleanup person, Philo, who was one of the heads on Ariel, I think he was the head on it, cleanup. He took out all the lines and fixed it and put it on model and stuff. So I was thankful for that, but I struggled on that Ariel, and she was just too difficult. I remember walking in to Glenn Keane's office and saying, hey, can you think you could go over this, see what I'm doing wrong? And just went there. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I did the same to Mark Henn. I walked right in. He did the same thing. And I'm like, I can't. And I looked at it, I noticed there are certain ways to get that expression without putting in all the lines and everything. But I wasn't there yet, and I was nervous about the whole thing anyway. So after struggling a couple of times, they pulled me into their offices, John and Ron, said, we're going to put you on Ursula instead. Thanks. Because Ursula, she's got, everything is pretty much anchored. The formula is pretty good. And even then I still struggle, over the model, because these type of characters, well, they weren't cartoon rabbits. And yeah, I struggled with drawings. A lot of people are, you've got people, like I said, like Sandro and Baxter and people like that, are just naturals.
Yeah.
Just do it. And I struggle over every single scene I do. And I labor over it to get the right look. And so I got on to Ursula, and I did Ursula. You're gonna have to hold for 1 second.
Okay. All right, we're back.
Okay, so I felt that Ursula was a little easier to handle for me, and her design was very forgiving, whereas Ariel, everything had to, every shot had to be, every angle had to be pretty and all this stuff. And Ursula was a little more forgiving in that realm, a little more character, a little more exaggeration involved in her. So I still had trouble on the film. I had, it took me a long time to actually fit in. In fact, by the time I finished, I barely got in the credits, because I only had I had a little over 100 feet on the film, and that was the rule. If you didn't get over 100 feet on the film, you didn't get in the credits. So I got like 104, and that was good. I mean, I got on the picture halfway through it, so I still managed to get the credit on there, but I struggled so much on that film, I almost got let go. And they basically said, well, we need everybody on board for Rescuers Down Under, so we're not going to let you go. So basically it was a reprieve.
Yeah.
And when we got on the Rescuers, well, the whole film was in story problems, story hell. So we just sort of sat around, and then they said, okay, well, we need some people to work on Cranium Command. And Cranium Command was the Disney World pavilions of whatever, the pavilions of life thing that they're working on. And that helped me, sort of gave me a little bit of time to relax and get into the flow of things. And I just, they liked what I was doing, and so that was it was a good experience, because I was working on a film that I really thought was great, Mermaid, but I fought with cleanup artists. I in some ways I even struggled with the directors, and it was a baptism by fire, but I'm
made
glad
it through.
Yeah,
you made it through, man. We all need a little bit of adversity iron sharpens iron. It comes up so many times. Like, I've heard so many animators say it, and so many writers, and everybody that I've had on this podcast that said it. They dealt with imposter syndrome whenever they got to where the lights were the brightest. And I'm going to use a wrestling analogy. I don't know if you're Canadian, so I got to imagine that you might have watched a little wrestling, maybe some Stampede wrestling up in Canada when you were younger. Maybe the Hart Foundation and whatnot. Stu Hart, Bret Hart.
You're kidding? You'd be wrong. I may be Canadian, but I am not Canada. I don't like beer. I don't like hockey. In fact, we lived in Toronto, and Buffalo Sabres hockey kept preempting my favorite shows in the 70s. So I always hated hockey. It's like I wanted to get the Rochester stations, because they're the only ones that didn't preempt my shows that I wanted to see. So I have, a lot of that stuff. I'm totally like art side. It's terrible in sports. That's yeah. So give me your analogy anyway.
The only reason I use that as an analogy, because for wrestling fans, like WWE and back at the time WWF was like the pinnacle. So Disney animation is the pinnacle for most animators. Like that's the spot you want to get. You want to work for the House of Mouse. Like that is the top of everybody's wish list. Everybody wants to be on the Disney movie because Disney has been known for decade upon decade upon decade of making hits, man. I mean, they've made some stinkers here and there, but for the most part, they've got a pretty good success rate. And a lot of the animators would talk about like that was the pinnacle. I had to get to Disney. I had to get to Disney. And you got to Disney. And so many people, excuse me, so many people said the first time they got to Disney, the first thing, everything that was going through their mind was imposter syndrome. Like, I'm not doing this. I can't do this. I can't be here. Everybody else is so much better. But like I said, at the end of the day, iron sharpens iron. So you needed that little bit of struggle to really propel yourself because you stayed at Disney for quite some time, man. And you got to work on a lot of amazing characters, man. We listed off a few, man. I mean, just jumping ahead just a little bit. So before we get off of Ursula, though, just for a quick second, man, what was the favorite part from that movie that you animated? And what was the favorite part from that movie that you didn't animate that one of your friends might have animated?
Hey guys, it's your resident cartoon junkie Brandon Jones here, asking you to have a listen to my Animation Destination podcast. It's an animation celebration podcast, and it's full of all sorts of stuff about anime and cartoons and voice acting and all that sort of thing, and just a really all-around celebration of anything animated. So come on by and check it out. We've got fan episodes of your favorite animes to your most obscure cartoons on Netflix that no one's ever heard of, and just really love talking about it. You can subscribe to us on Spotify and iTunes and anywhere else you can get your podcasts from. So stop on by, subscribe, and stay tuned for the Animation Destination podcast.
Oh, well, there's nothing really that I remember not liking about the film. I was pretty much impressed with a whole lot of things. Amazed at Glenn's stuff, and I knew Andreas from Roger Rabbit, so he was doing great stuff. Everybody. I can't really. I think some of the things I liked. I like Mark Henn's Ariel. I know this is sacrilege for those people who are Glenn Keane fans, and I'm not taking anything away from Glenn, but there was a cuteness about Mark Henn's Ariel, a very naive, the part where she gets out of bed and looks in the mirror and goes, I mean, that is beautiful. That's that has such, I don't know,
human qualities. Yeah,
innocent character, innocent appeal to it. It was very likable, even though she didn't talk. It was that I remember really responding to those scenes. And let's see, as far as my stuff goes, it's funny. I think some of the stuff that I don't like is my own. There's one scene where when I was in school, when I was going to college, Sheridan College in Canada for animation, we would study all sorts of animation of the past, and we'd put it on a big flat bed editing table, and we'd get 60 millimeter prints of the film and go frame by frame and look at some of this stuff. This was just before VHS came out, so and even then you couldn't really go frame by frame with VHS because it was a different format. So you couldn't get proper timing from it. So as we're looking at some of this stuff, we would look at a lot of Warner Brothers, and we'd see all these blur wipes and things like that, and we'd look at how they did it. You have a key, you'd slow out of it, do the wipe, and then you would recoil. So it would be here and then boom and then recoil, and so I did that. We did that a lot in our tests and things like that. All these elaborate wipes and stuff like that. I actually did that on Ursula in one scene, and I regret it so much because it wasn't the proper vehicle to do that. It's a feature film. It wasn't a Looney Tunes short. So there's a scene in it where she says, "Go ahead, make your choice," and you got this "go ahead," and you got this strange drawing in there, and I'm like, ah, shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have. I wish I could take that back. And but again, I was still finding my legs on it. By the time I got to the last stuff that I did, which was when Triton first confronts Ursula, that is my favorite scene, where he comes in and Ursula, stop, and not so fast, Triton, and all that, and she's there, and she has all these, touching the trident and all that stuff. That's the scene I really like that I did. I thought I was finally getting a hold of the character. I got criticized a lot early on because I was off model, and so I really worked on that scene to make sure I was on model. And I still remember doing the scene where she says, "King Triton, how are you?" And I really wanted to get that look. And because I was off model, it went to cleanup, and they took this and they turned it to this. And it's like, that's not what I was going for. I'm getting on proportion. Just draw it the way I have it. It works, but you have to earn that sort of trust and respect from the follow-up people. And I actually created made a stink about it, and they cleaned it up as is, so I was very happy with that, and I think it's probably my best scene in the film. But I was kind of happy to move on to something different, and with the Rescuers, it wasn't a big film. Well, it started at a big film. This is the hilarious thing about this. When Katzenberg and Eisner got into it, Katzenberg started to go through and try to figure out stories and stuff that they could do in animation. Right. This is before Mermaid and all that. No, it's around the same time. What's going to come after Mermaid? And so the story goes that Katzenberg looked at what made the most money in its initial run, that they maybe they could do a sequel. And they found that Rescuers, the original Rescuers, did very well in its initial run. And they thought, well, let's do a Rescuers 2. Let's do a sequel to it, So they put this thing into production. And then as they were getting close to getting into the production of the film, they released Rescuers, the original, and it bombed. They re-released it and it bombed, right? And then they go, oh man, no one wants to see this, and we're doing a sequel, but we're too far into it. So I can remember sitting there, Peter Schneider giving us this pep talk. He's like, okay, so we know we made a mistake, but we just gotta get this thing done, okay? It's not gonna be great, it's not gonna be popular, but let's just get it done, And I'm sitting there going, is this a pep talk? Because I don't really feel encouraged about this. Just get it done. But I don't know. It turned out okay. It's not the greatest film in the world, but there's entertaining parts in it, and I was able to really kind of get my feet wet on that film. I was initially just thrown on random characters, but after I got back from Ukrainian Command, the directors on Rescuers said, we saw your stuff on Ukrainian Command and we'd like to put you on Wilbur. And I said, sounds great. And I asked them if I could get the section I wanted, which was his introduction, which was the whole, the umbrellas and the fruity things. And, you want to go to Australia? Great. Let's figure out, pull the map down, all that stuff. And that's the stuff that really, when I saw the screening, so much, personality. That's the stuff I really want to do. And so they gave it to me. And about 2 months before the end of it, there was some mix up with with the whole with the lead animator on that, and they had to take him off of the character, and they asked me if I wanted to be the supervisor on Wilbur, and I said, we're 2 months away from completion. The character's been designed. Everyone has their assignments. What's there left to supervise? And they looked at me and they said, well, you'll get your name in the credits as a supervisor. And I said, okay, I'll take that. So I see that, and it's like supervisor, you know, supervisors, and I'm there. It doesn't say that I'm supervisor Wilbur, but I'm one of the supervisors. So hey, that's a pretty good credit. So yeah, I'll take
that's a win for Nick, man.
Yeah, and then after that, you know, Beauty and the Beast came up, and I started to the people who were directing Beauty and the Beast were the same people who directed Crane Command. Great, you know. They asked me if I wanted to do, you know, Lumiere, and I said sure, that sounds great, and you know, worked on that. And then right after that, I thought, hey, I'm riding high, you know, this is great. I got 2 supervising positions under my belt. I mean, 1.5 maybe. And so I thought, what's the next film? And I looked at it, and it was Aladdin and Ron and John. And I'm like, oh boy, okay, here we go. Because they were the ones that, you know, they wanted to let me go. And so I was like, okay. So I thought, well, time has passed, but maybe I'll get something. Maybe there's a secondary character I could do, right? Well, that wasn't the way it worked, because
they put you on Jafar, man.
They had their favorites,
yeah.
You know, and I said, you know, can I do? What did I ask them? I asked them for, you know, I said, well, what about the narrator? Can I do that? It's a small part of it. No, you can't. Oh, okay. Well, what about Jafar as the beggar? I could do it. No, Kathy's doing that. Oh, okay. Well, what about no? And eventually I went, you don't want me to supervise, do you? And John just goes, so fine, okay. So Andreas says, hey, do you want? I need people on Jafar, and I said, sure, yeah, Jafar's, you know, good. So yeah, I did that. And the good thing about Andreas is that, you know, it was me, Ken Duncan, Ron Husband, trying to think of others on the couple others, but he would give us all like sections to do, and this, you know, here's your sequence, which is a good thing to do. I learned from that. I always tried to give people sequences if I felt really confident in their work. I wanted to give them a section that they could call their own, that they could work out their continuity. And I wasn't about to do the supervisor trick, whereas I would just go in, take all the juicy stuff for myself and leave them the dregs, right? You know, that's not a way to get good work out of people, right? So yeah, so I got a couple of sequences of Jafar. I actually kind of wanted to work on the genie, but I was so intimidated by Eric, who that was his first, you know, character at Disney, and I didn't know him very well, and I wasn't sure. I was just intimidated by that character. And as much as I enjoyed comedy, I try to play to my strengths, because I like comedic elements of animation, and I always try to do things that get a rise out of people. Glenn, Andreas, those guys, they want pathos. They want making people cry, and that's good, but that's not my thing. I always, you know, sort of favored the comedy characters, and so yeah, I said to Andreas, yeah, I'll take work on Jafar, and it turned out to be really good. I found out years later, Eric said, yeah, I just kind of wanted you to work on the genie. And I'm like, I should have asked, but I didn't know how to. I didn't even know you very well and all this. So you know, that's what are you gonna do?
Speaking on Eric, and I wanted to ask you two questions, but we'll probably save those for down the road. But I'll pregame you with it. Favorite Andrea story and favorite Eric story. Hold on to that thought for just a second, and we'll talk about those because I got to imagine you working with both those legends. You got some good ones, man. But have you gotten the chance to see? Oh fuck, what is it called? Sketchbook. I don't know why I blank. Have you gotten a chance to watch on Sketchbook on Disney Plus?
Um, no, I haven't. I haven't watched that one. I should watch the Eric one.
That's the one. You got to watch him, and then what is his name? It'll come back to me. I can't think of the other one. It was the Korean animator, and I don't know why I'm blanking.
What's his name? Oh man,
I can't
Kim
believe
Kim?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kim. I cannot believe I blanked on his name because he drew Captain Hook, which is my favorite villain. And it's probably because I'm an ex-sailor, and it's probably because of just he dressed so snazzy. But Captain Hook is one of my favorite villains of all time across anything. The Jungle Book has always been my favorite Disney movie of all time. I love Baloo. Baloo's my favorite hero, if you want to call him a hero character.
Yeah.
He's my favorite character in Disney lore. You know, I love the Shere Khans. You know, if we're sitting here talking, I love King Louis. There's so many villains.
Yeah.
Jafar's up there as well. Ursula is terrifying. Hades is another one you worked on. That's, in my opinion, probably the last, when it comes to villains that Disney's done, probably the last villain they've done that is perfect. There's nothing slow about him. There's nothing off about everything about that character from start to finish, from animating to voice to the writing of it. Everything is perfect about Hades. I absolutely love that character. But watching Eric draw the genie, that's him. I'm sitting there and I've told this story a few times, so I'll make it a brief one. I wanted to be an animator when I was younger. I would see something and I would draw. I just always had a pen in my hand, always had a pencil in my hand. I just draw. And it wasn't until it was before I was 10 years old. We got the chance to go to Universal with my dad before he went to prison. And this was when SpongeBob SquarePants was rolling out, right? So they said, hey, we're doing this. And this was before all the animation went from Nickelodeon Studios in Orlando, before everything moved out to LA. They still had a skeleton crew there. So they're like, hey, we're doing this tour. We're going to roll out this new show. And we want to show it off to people so we can build up some hype for it. They're like, if you're interested, come by. And I was balls deep into cartoons, man. I wanted to draw. I wanted to be an animator. I was like, dad, please go. Let's go. So we go to see it. And I remember looking down and into the artist alley, the artist pit, the room where they were working. And there was this lone artist over into a corner, right? And he's drawing and he tears it and throws it away. He does it again, and he's like, fuck. You can see him being visibly frustrated. And I remember, asking the lady, like, hey, why does he keep throwing the stuff away? And she was like, well, if it's not on model, and this is something you were just talking about. If it's not on model, he has to start over and he has to redo it. It has to be what his boss is saying has to be that way. So I go, oh, well, all the pictures that I don't like, my mom keeps, and she says are really good. And that completely deterred me away from being an animator. I wish I could go back in time and chase that dream. Even if I would have failed at it, I wish I could go back in time and chase that dream. But nonetheless, man, we're here talking animation. That's in my opinion, that's just as good, because I don't have to do all the work that you guys do with the carpal tunnel and the broken fingers and all this other shit. I get to just talk to you guys about what you guys did, man. Right. So I feel like I've seen some people, that was just a joke though. So getting to see, like, so the whole reason I tell you that story is I'm watching Sketchbook as soon as it drops. And he's the first episode I go to, right? First one I skip. He's like episode 5 or 6. He's the first one I go to, right? I had just gotten done talking to Tom Cito. We talked Genie. That episode dropped that same week. We were talking Genie and Robin Williams coming in and to MGM and having the whole moment and everything like that. And I'm watching him, and he inspired me to pause it. I was like, I'm going to go get my sketchbook. I'm going to go get a pencil, and I'm going to draw a Genie with Eric, because he is so inviting. The same kind of energy Sandra has was the same kind of energy that was exuding off the screen. I wish they would have done 6 parts just with Eric. He could have drew the Genie in the same fucking pose every single time, and I would have been hooked, because the stories he was telling, right? So I'm telling you, he motivated me to go get something, and I'm sitting there, I'm drawing with him. And I'm gonna tell you right now, it wasn't 10 seconds into it, I'm like, I can't do what Eric's doing because this dude is a master at his craft. And I completely gave up right then and there. I was like, I'm just going to sit back and I'm enjoy it. I watched that episode twice in a row, man, back to back. And I'm just sitting there thinking, wow, this dude is a master at his craft. He is the master. Obviously, that's his character, right? But
He is another one of those naturals.
Yes.
I mean, he just knows. He doesn't have to test a lot of things. He can just do it, and then it's right.
Yes.
He did a 20-foot shot or 30-foot shot or something in like a week. It was all on ones, and it just or twos.
Can you explain that to people really quick? I've got the ratio, or I've got the formula in my. I have an animation director. I talked to Mr. Robert Alvarez, and he's broken down the feet and what it equates to in seconds and minutes and everything like that. But can you explain to the listeners really quick what that means? What you just said?
So it's all based on the I don't know why they base it on the actual length of a foot of film.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that's how they measured things back then. So a foot of film is 16 frames. A second of film is 24 frames. So when someone says you did it all on ones, that means you did 24 separate drawings or 12 drawings and charted to have those 12 drawings in between to reach a total of 24 in a second. And you don't do that all the time. You do it on special quick movements. I think the genie was a lot on ones just because of the fluidity and
exaggerated poses and
whatnot. And things like that, and the speed in which the character moved. I did a lot of ones for Hades just because of the hand gestures and a lot of the rotations and the arcs that his hand had to do, and hands and all that had to do. So that's pretty much. So when you say 20 feet, you just times that by 16, and then you divide it by 24, and you get the
number of drawings,
the number of seconds that is. So yeah, so that's pretty. I still think in that, even though I work digitally now, but still, it's
something that'll never leave you.
Right. So yeah, so okay, so you were going to ask about Andreas and
your favorite Andreas story and your favorite Eric story.
Well, do they have to be animation related?
No, they don't. They could be any story. Whenever you hear those two names in particular, does a story, a moment, a chat you guys had?
I can tell you a couple of things.
Okay.
Well, the first thing is the first one was I met Andreas during Roger Rabbit,
mm-hmm.
and he was one of the supervisors there, and I sat really close to him, just a couple of feet away, and he was very kind. When I got chewed out by Dick Williams, he said, don't worry, but it's okay, everything's fine, that's Dick for you. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, there was 2 times I got chewed up by Dick Williams, and of course when Dick chews you out, he doesn't say quietly come into my office. He just goes Rah! And everybody looks up from their desk because it was an all open plan. Yeah. And the first thing, when I first got to Roger Rabbit, I was an in-betweener, and then I got promoted to a breakdown guy. I was an assistant to the guys who was doing the props,
mm-hmm.
And so I would do in-betweens and all that. And through a series of really, amazing situations, I was able to get promoted to animator in a very short time because they needed people. And there were a lot of animators in England, but there were those who wouldn't work with Dick, and there were those who Dick wouldn't work with. So they sort of narrowed it down to a certain group. And so they were looking for people. And when they promoted me, I thought, oh, okay, I'm promoted to animator. They're going to give me scenes. I'm going to start animating. Yeah, here we go. So they gave me, my first scene was a Baby Herman scene, and the scene was Baby Herman going, I can pay you. You know, he had the cigar. Okay, yeah, right. And they came with these drawings, you know, and I go, okay, well, these are the layout drawings. They tell me the size and everything like that. And so I sat down and started animating. I did a rough, and I showed it to Dick. And then Dick looked at it and he just started shaking and started yelling at me. It's like, what do you think you're doing? Changing my drawings. What do you think you're doing? And I'm like, I'm going, what? It's like, you think you're out of school, my 35 years experience. And I just cowering, and I didn't know what was going on. And I found out later is that I was promoted, but I wasn't a full-fledged animator. I was in the training program, so to speak, and I needed to pay my dues, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I was put on the Baby Herman unit, where all sort of trainee animators are given keyframes by Dick. And you would have to work in and out of those keyframes and flesh it out. So he would pose out all the Baby Herman stuff, all the stuff where he's talking about, you know, talking to Roger in the crib and, you know, slapping the girl in the butt and all that.
Yeah.
That whole section, Dick basically posed out, and he got different animators to flesh it all out that were trainees. So I didn't know. So I was taking his drawings, treating them with layout, using them for size comparison, then tossing them to the side and doing what I want. And he flipped out, and no one told me, right? So, and the second time he chewed me out was he went to LA to he went to LA to deal with Toontown, because that's where they did Toontown, was in Los Angeles. And so he was gone for a week. And he gave me the scene where Roger runs, come on, Eddie, let's get out of here. Move it, Pops, this is the express, right? And he trips down the stairs or whatever. Or, no, he doesn't trip down the stairs. When I first got it, the dialogue was, move it, Pops, this is the express. And he zips out. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm drawing it and looking at it going, man, I don't know. So I talked to Andreas, like, what do you think? And Andreas looks at it and goes, you know, he's a rabbit, but we never actually see him hop. Well, maybe we should hop. Maybe we should make him hop. So I did this scene. I still have the rough. I think it's on the Facebook page, where he runs out and move it, Pops, this is the express. And he's hopping down, and he does a zippity zips right out, right? And I thought, oh, this is great. They're going to love it. This is great, right? So Dick comes back, and I'm sitting there proudly showing it. And basically, Dick writes out everything. As he's working with Zemeckis, he goes through and he creates a brief, like a quick storyboard of everything he and Zemeckis talked about as they go through the sequence. And you're supposed to follow the brief. And the brief didn't have a hop, and the brief didn't have, you know, all this stuff, right? So I just didn't think about that, right? So he looks at it. Of course, again, he starts to shake, and he goes, what do you think? And everyone's head comes up and looks up, and I'm cowering again. And then I look over at Andreas, and Andreas is like, just drawing up with his head down. I was, no moral support, Andreas? Aren't you gonna? No.
Come supervise this ass chewing. Please help me.
And then the other thing with Andreas is that during Roger Rabbit, it was a who's who. Everybody came through that studio. It was almost like, you know, Spielberg's toy to show off to people. So, you know, we had guests coming through all the time. And I sat right next to the door. So nobody could get in and out of that studio, the animation studio, without me knowing who. And if I heard someone come in and there's commotion, my head would peek up and see if it was anybody special. And if it wasn't, I just go back to work, right? I always had a camera at my desk because, you know, it was an experience for me. I was in England. There's all these different, you know, maybe get a picture with Spielberg. Maybe. And so all these people would come through and all that. And I remember you get sort of starstruck, and you're trying to pal around with people. And I remember just sort of peeking my head up and listening as Zemeckis was there, and Frank Marshall and Robert Watts, and all these people were there. and Andreas was there, and we were talking, and at one point, Andreas was like, Zemeck was going, he goes, "Hey, Bob, see ya," and it's like, "Hey, Frank," and he did that, and I just looked at him, and I went, and he goes, "Shut up!" He's so caught up in the whole, yeah, "Hey, Frank." "Love you, babe." My inspiration for Hades. Hey.
Oh, that is so cool, man. Does he know that?
No, it wasn't. My inspiration for Hades was Katzenberg, but
Really?
Oh yeah. But no, it was a moment where I sort of made fun of him, but he got the joke, right?
And you had me hook, line, and sinker on both of them there. I was along for the ride, man. I appreciate it.
And then as far as Eric goes, man, everything that guy touched, he could do no wrong. He did amazing stuff. In fact, some of the best stuff. I mean, I remember when we were working on Princess and the Frog, and he
beautiful movie
came. I did a test of little Charlotte, young Charlotte, and it was Daddy, look at my new dress.
Yeah.
And I did this bounce where she rotates, and it got a good response. People laughed, which is what I was hoping for, because you always try to wow them, and Eric says, "That's a good scene." And I'm like, "Oh yes, that's great." Yeah. So but one of the big things I remember is how they tried to fit him into a mold that he shouldn't even have. One of the last couple of years I was there, they tried to get everybody in to do CGI. And I remember one of the other animators there, Bert Klein, who's a friend of Eric's and mine and all that. And he says, "Eric, why don't you come and try CGI? I mean, you're probably really good at it and all that." And I had done CGI before, but I've been rusty because I was on Princess of the Frog, and I hadn't really done anything for a couple of years there. And so I was very rusty on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed a refresher's course, because unlike paper and pencil, which is like, "Oh, I remember now. This is all like, okay, what button do I have to push now? Before it was this one, but now it's this one." I don't. So Eric, he came down, and they had a trainee person there, a trainer, and they all sat us at computers, and they just started to go through, "Okay, now do this and do that, and then log in here and do this, and now you want to take this thing and move it to here and move that there." And after about 20 minutes, about 10 minutes, Eric just got up and left.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, why are they trying to, why would they want him to come down to try out or do this when he was so good at what he was doing?
Yes.
He was like a master, and you want to throw him into a situation where, I remember James Baxter used to call CGI the great equalizer. It made really good animators sort of okay, really bad animators better, because, there's a lot of things you don't have to worry about in CG. Your model's already there. You just have to make sure it moves properly. And there's some who excel in it. There's been really amazing CGI animation that's just beautiful and all that. But it's Eric is a master at 2D, at hand drawn.
Yes.
He shouldn't have to change. He should continue to be a master.
There's in my opinion, there's a space for both. You got your Pixar, you've got your CGI, and I'm so glad, and I believe spoiler alert, he says it in his episode that there will be another 2D traditionally drawn animated project coming out of Disney soon. And I hope, because we've heard that so many times over so many years, I hope it's true, because in my opinion, there's space, just like there's space for our style of animation. There's space for anime. There's space for fucking cartoons coming out of Canada, China, Africa, all these places. There's a space for everything. And I really hope that we can get and see at least one more time before I leave this earth. One more time, I want to see a traditionally drawn, handmade animated movie. I mean, Miyazaki's talking about doing it again.
It's as long as they do it like sincerely. I mean,
I don't see Eric putting his name on anything that's not sincere, though. So that's why I hope it's done.
It's kind of like people talk about Paperman. You know, oh, Paperman was this blend of CGI and hand drawn, and it's like, no, it wasn't. It's a blend of CGI and cleanup. That's all it is. There's no hand drawn animation in that film. I don't care what you say. Oh, but it's lines. It's vectors. It's basically you put vectors around it, you clean it up, and that's all. You're just cleaning up the CG stuff. That's it. You know, and one of the saddest things I remember seeing, looking at the credits on Paperman, seeing Eric Goldberg's name in cleanup. It's just, what a waste.
Yes.
You know, don't give me that. And I still remember a video I saw years ago about with Dale Bear, doing a 2D animation test for this short that they were working on, Feast or something like that. It was this dog animation. And you cut to the director going, see, in this scene that Dale did, I want to get that sort of that life, that playfulness, that thing, and I want to get that into our CG stuff. And I'm thinking, you got it right there. Just clean it up. Yeah. You're trying to reinvent the wheel on some of this stuff. You want to take this beautiful animation, you want to inspire someone to do it in CG so you can put a line around it and call it hand-drawn or 2D style or whatever. It's ridiculous. If you want to do 2D, do 2D. And
yes,
but again, I mean, I guess I'm old-fashioned.
No, there's a lot of fans, and there's a lot of people that I've talked to that are still in the animation field that feel the same way you do, that I do. Like I said, there is a space for the Pixars. There's a space for the traditional style animation. There's a space for everything. Put it up there and let the fans vote with their wallet. I just
hope that it is a traditional thing. Even if it's done on Cintiq, I still hope it's a traditional, and it's not just a, whatever they call that, Toon Shade or whatever, trying to pretend it's 2D. So I hope he's right about that. It would be great. That would be amazing.
It really
believe
would.
It when I see it. Seriously. I mean,
they've been talking about it for years, so hopefully one day we might see it. Like I said, Miyazaki said before he is done, his last project, I'm pretty sure I'm taking that out of context, or I might be even just fucking up the quote, but I do know he said he wants to have one more come from him, from his hands. Everything is going to be hand-drawn, traditional style. I believe he said that, and I'm pretty sure it's as recent as just a couple months ago the article came out. I might be conflating that with something else that I've read, but I'm pretty sure I've seen that article. But I know, thank you for sharing those stories. But I really liked Andreas, and I really wish you wouldn't have told me that he wasn't. Hey, have a good one, Bob. Because I see that in Hades, and I'm like, fuck, man, that makes perfect sense, like that right there. But jumping forward, and before we jump forward, I would love to have you back on, because I always tell everybody there's no way I can do just a fifth of your career in just the 1 hour that we might spend with each other. So thank you. I'd love to have you come back on. We can talk a little bit more in depth about Lumiere, Jafar, and Hades, specifically Hades. But I would be remiss to not talk to you before we get to the fans' questions about one of my favorite movies of all time. I mean, The Emperor's New Groove. Were you on it before it was The Emperor's New Groove?
I was on it. Yes, I was on it. It was still
Empire of the Sun and Moon. Yeah.
Kingdom of the Sun.
Yeah.
This is my personal sculpture of that character while it was still in pre-production.
Mm-hmm.
And in production, actually, there was like 1,000 feet done on that film. and
Did they put it all in the documentary that they did, the Sweatbox?
yeah, some of it. I mean, I wish they would put more. I wish they would release the song.
Yeah.
Just for your curiosity, this is.
Oh, that is so cool.
These are all the.
Is that Remy from Ratatouille? Or no, that's Meko. Excuse me, that's Meko.
Yeah. Sorry, it's hard to move the big old thing around there.
Oh no, you're perfectly fine. I've just noticed that I'll be 33 in August 13th. My eyesight has gotten shit lately. I don't know what it is. None of my brothers and sisters wear glasses. Well, that's a lie. My little sister wears glasses, but she's had glasses since she was born. She was born with a genetic disorder with her eyes and stuff like that. So she's always had glasses. But I've just noticed that my eyes are shit as of late. And I was like, oh shit, that's Ratatouille. I'm like, no, that's not Ratatouille, dum dum. He didn't work on
no, that's what the thing is. I mean, this was another thing. In the move, it got destroyed, but I have to glue it back together, which was Lumiere. This was the maquette that they used, which I did the sculpt for.
That's so cool, man.
As I was, had to, work with the rotation of the head and everything like that. And they said, hey, can we cast it and use that as the official maquette? I was like, yeah, sure. That's great,
That is really awesome. So thank you for sharing those, man. But so let's stay on Emperor's New Groove for just a few minutes. And like I said, we'll end it, and then we'll pick up some fans' questions, and then we'll reconvene and talk again. Like I said, I've really enjoyed this conversation, man. So thank you for telling me the stories and reminiscing with me for just a little while. Oh man, Kuzco, that one, no touchy, was one of my friends and I go-to lines. Like I remember, so.
There are people who use the lines from that film. That's the very quotable lines on that film.
Oh, I've heard so much because of, talking to Sandro, talking to a couple people like yourself that have worked on the movie, and then watching the documentary, The Sweatbox, and hearing and seeing the shit show that movie really was. And I hate saying stuff like that, because there are people that take offense to that because they think I'm shitting on something, and I'm not. I look at it and I hear the stories that you guys and gals went through during the process of this, the consistent shakeup, the ups, the downs, and then you find out when The Emperor's New Groove, the movie that we do get, Disney didn't want it. They just put it out there. There was very little money spent on promoting this movie. It was just, here's a movie, we got to get it out. We already made it, we got to get it out there, right? And then, like I said, you hear the stuff that you hear in the Sweatbox. I've heard the stories secondhand or the interviews. But looking at this movie, like I said, this was a hit right out of the gate with my friends and I. From the quotes to the lines, Kronk was amazing. Yzma, phenomenal villain. Like everything about this movie, my friends and I loved, man. So I got to imagine, with you being the guy that did Kuzco and Llama Kuzco, man, where does this one rank for you as far as this character in particular? Out of all the characters you've worked out, where would Kuzco rank for you?
Wow. That's like saying, who's your favorite child?
We all have that favorite kid, Nick. You just have to make sure that you're my favorite, and then you tell the other one you're my favorite, so it pits them against each other.
I give you a quick rundown. Basically, one of the things, it's hard to say where he sits, because all the characters I've done, and sorry to say, it doesn't include Ursula and Jafar. I'm talking about the ones that I supervised.
Yeah.
One of the things that I worried about for when I was doing these characters and stuff was to get typecast and pigeonholed into second banana characters. Mm-hmm. What I didn't foresee was the fact that, the comedy character can manifest itself in many different forms. And I was fortunate enough to hit all my dreams, but still stay in the genre that I preferred.
Yes.
So, always wanted to do a side character, I got Lumiere. Okay, he was an inanimate object, so there's a lot of challenges with that. Always, and then I saw Duncan Marjoribanks work on Abu, the monkey, and pretty amazed by that because he had no dialogue to back him up. So we had to come up with all this stuff, and pantomime always scared me. And then I got Meko, and I worked out my my mental dialogue in my head for him, and so he was a secondary character, a second banana, but he was a pantomime character, so I got to do that. Then I got to do a villain, but he was also a comedy villain. I mean, Ursula and Jafar had their moments, and they were funny and all that stuff, but Hades was, more comedy than drama in that way. So I got to do a villain, but he was a comedy villain. I thought I'll never do a lead character ever because they're always, the brave and the strong and the pathos and the crying and all that stuff. Kuzco came along, main character, but he's a comedy character. And I thought I'll never get to do a female lead because they're all, heroines and, beautiful and sing their want songs. But then I get to do Charlotte, who's a female character, but she's a funny female character, right? So I got to do a whole wide variety of performances with the similar thread throughout them. So Kuzco is definitely up there. I always say that Emperor's New Groove is the film I would have loved to have worked on had I not. And because my origins are not like Andreas and Glenn, who used to study the works of Milt Kahl and Frank and Ollie and all that stuff. I grew up on Warner Brothers. That was my stuff. And then Popeye. Those are the things that inspired me. Warner Brothers, especially, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, all that stuff. That's what clicked me in. I wanted to entertain in that way. I wanted to make people laugh in that way. I wanted to do characters like that, the funny stuff, the stop pronoun trouble, that type of thing. In fact, Chuck Jones was my favorite director. He was the director that I would see his name up there and realize a lot of the films I like are his, and so again, and his crew, Ken Harris, those guys. I mean, just amazing stuff. And then as I got into Disney, I started to. It's not that I ignored the Disney stuff. I thought it was good, but it was good in a different way. I respected it. It was beautiful animation and flowed and all that stuff. But for pure entertainment, I remember I first talked to Andreas, and he would go on about all the Mickey shorts and the Goofy shorts, and I was like, I haven't really watched a lot of those, But Bugs Bunny, that's how Eric and I clicked in, because he was the same way. He was actually probably more than that, but he was a Warner Brothers aficionado as well, but yeah, that's the type of that's my mindset. So The Emperor's New Groove was as close to a Warner Brothers feature as I think I've ever gotten. You watch it and I mean, when I remember watching the story reel and going, this is the type of stuff I've always wanted to do, It's like, but I practically raised him. You think it would have turned out better? Yeah, go ahead. That stuff, I love that stuff. That's sort of back and forth, repartee type things. I mean, it had that in it. And I was like, I remember, the big pullback, and the monkey. What's with the monkey and the bug? It's like, I love this film. I want to work on this. I got to do this film, And as much as I like Roger Allers, and I know his vision would have turned out great if he had time to finish it, I was really happy with Groove. It was the film I really wanted to work on. I was so glad that we did it, because there's such great stuff in that. So there's so much things in that. I tried so hard on that, and it was a huge effort because I had two characters I had to deal with, and I had a huge crew. It's the biggest crew I've ever had because I had like 4 people on on Kuzco human, and about 12 or 13 people on Kuzco llama. And I spent most of my day running from animator to animator, checking shots and stuff like that. And then I'd stay late and work till like 11 or 12, 10, 11 and 12. I still had to drive home. I was at Burbank to wherever I was at the time, Santa Clarita. And so I had to make sure I didn't fall asleep at the wheel. But other than that, it was a long day's work every day, just trying to get that stuff done. And yeah, then there were scenes that just took forever. I mean, some of the longest footage I've ever done in my life was on that. There's like a 75-foot scene of Kuzco, the first shot in the film, where he's whimpering and crying, and you know, you put everything into it that you could, and try to get as much entertainment value out of it. But it also, working with those people, that's Disney, with Glenn, Mark, Andreas, Eric, Will, Dave, you know, Ruben, all these, you know, I'm missing Kathy, you know, it's just, it forms in you a sense of admiration and competition at the same time. You find yourself like going, this is great to be among all these people that are at the top of their game, but it also strives you because you want to work more. You want to excel. So every scene you get, you try to do what Baxter did at Roger Rabbit. He was a trainee, and somebody gave him a couple of scenes to do, and they were just foot on a pedal, pumping the gas, and they were like, "This is beautiful animation. We got to promote him." It was just a foot pumping the gas, you know. And he took it and he did it to the best of his ability, and he just the stuff shined because it was so fluid, you know. And so every scene I got, I always tried to make sure that I
knocked it out of the park.
As best as I could, you know, and try to add in those little things. To take a look at like references instead of looking at old animation, I would prefer to look at performances that I like. So you know, the whole, you know, no touchy, all that stuff. You know, there's an old Don Knotts film, Shakiest Gun in the West. It's like, these things are, you know, the Andy Griffith Show, Barney Fife, you know, like this. Don't come near me. It's lethal weapons here, you know, that type of stuff. So that was the idea for that shot, you know, is this the no touchy thing.
I wrote that one down so I could check it out.
But, you know, that type of thing, big inspiration. One of my favorite series of all time is the Dick Van Dyke Show. And Dick Van Dyke is like a cartoon character in real life. I mean, there's certain things, you look at certain episodes where he's uncomfortable and he's, you know, look at the body language, you watch that, you watch certain things you do. I mean, I remember, you know, studying some of that. I also remember looking at life and coming up with little bits that I thought, I'd love to put this in. I remember like 10 years earlier, I remember going, I'd love to do a thing where a character just goes, I don't know. You know, that type of thing, which people do, right? It's kind of gross, but I just thought, one of these days I'm going to be able to use that. So you store it in the back. And then there's a scene where he goes, Ursula, so no hard feelings, right? So I thought this would be a perfect place to do that. And so I did a rough and Mark liked it. And so I put it in, and, you know, I don't even think there's a character that's ever, you know, picked an eye booger and ever, you know, but I just thought, yeah, I want to do something like that, do something that's never been done before, you know, because coming up with business and things to do with the hands and all that stuff, that's really hard to do. And you don't want to overact and you don't want to do too much. but you do want to do stuff that people will relate to. And so I always try to infuse my stuff with things like that, stuff that like certain pauses. There's a scene of Hades where he's talking to Hercules and he's like, you know, you maybe take a few days off, right? Well, there's no in it, but I thought that's what I would do. You know, maybe you could, I don't know, take a few days off. So I thought it's added work, but man, it brings a lot to the idea, the performance, and I thought if this were just a regular scene, I had to get it done. It's like you probably just do it. Maybe you could take a few days off. You just pause instead of doing something that makes the character relatable. It's like it's the old.
You hit him with the razzle dazzle. That's what you did.
Yeah,
You
it's
hit him
the
with the
old
razzle dazzle.
feeling thing. You make the characters come to life. Sylvester's carrying a bunch of stuff and things drop, and he has to put the stuff down, go back, pick up this thing, and come back. I mean, it's a lot of work, extra work, because it's animation. But you show that things happen, accidents happen. So I kept that in my mind. And there's a scene of Rescuers Down Under where he goes to pull the map down, a fair from here to there, and his first attempt is he misses it, and then he gets it on the second one. You know, things like that, and it sort of brings the character into reality a bit.
Yes,
you know,
humanizes him.
Yeah, it's not all perfect. It's relatable. You know, so. So yeah, but as far as Kuzco goes, you know, that to me, that was the best. Mark let us all sort of express ourselves, and I work with Tony and Bruce and Dale, and these guys, top of their game. Really love working with them. Wish I could have done more scenes with Tony, but I spent a lot of my time on human Kuzco. Like I said, it took me a month to do that scene of him in the rain, walking over and the leaf dumping water on him and all that stuff. And I said, I put a lot into that. It took me a long time to do it. Somebody told me years later that the animator who worked on that Boundin' Pixar film used that animation of Kuzco as a reference.
Really?
That was nice. I don't know how true it was, but somebody told me that, and I
just don't look into it, just in case it's false. Kind of like when you said Andreas was the. I should have just left it at that. I shouldn't have asked if Andreas was really the inspiration for Hades, because now I was a little crushed, Nick. But nonetheless, man. So I don't want to
tell you something about that. You could put a pin in that for the next time you want to talk about Hades. We'll talk about all that stuff.
Okay, well, I'm writing that one down. So I'm gonna write Hades, bring it back up. All right.
But yeah, the everybody was on top of their game. I had some really good people working on that film. I mean, Jin Kim was on the unit.
Yeah,
his stuff was amazing, and I had a lot of amazing people working on it. I don't think I would have gotten that film done if it hadn't been for a lot of the people who, you know, picked up the slack. I know I couldn't do it all, and because there's so much footage on that character, but I think it turned out great. So much great stuff, so much great animation in that. It was a very funny film. People comment about it constantly. It is one of, if not my favorite film, it's pretty close. Beauty and the Beast is one of those films that I think is really, everything works in that film for me.
Mm-hmm.
Beauty and the Beast is one of those ones where the characters that I worked on, like if you took Meko and Flit out of Pocahontas, you'd still have Pocahontas. That's how, you know, that's how integral to the plot they were. You know what I mean? So, which they weren't really, but they were just comic relief. But Lumiere and Kuzco, all that, they served a purpose. You know, it was a very strong story. So that one is one of my favorites, even though it's not one of our better looking films. Each film we learned from the previous ones, and so I can talk about that too in the future as well. but Groove was like for comedy, for the characters, even though it had a rough start to it, it was still, I was eminently satisfied with the result of that film, and I wish I could have done a couple of more like it. We almost did, and then the CG thing hit the studio, and that was it. Um, Mark and Randy went on to do Chicken Little, and I followed into the CG for that picture. But I always wanted to. Right after that, though, I almost had a potential. Their next picture was going to be like a thing tentatively called Red's Wolf, and it was a 2D film, and they wanted me to be the overall animation supervisor on it. I was like, this is great. This would be great. What a feather in my cap. And then the whole thing was shut down. And so that was a missed opportunity, but still, I got to work on that one, and that was a very special and amazing experience. It may be my favorite Disney film that I worked on.
Oh, that's high praise, man. Because like I said, I mean, you mentioned it earlier. It's very hard to pick when you have multiple kids which one's your favorite, even though, like I said, some days you might have a favorite, some days you might not like either one of them, right? So very rarely do I get to hear you guys say, hey, this one was probably my favorite. It's generally 2, 3, 4-way tie. However, Emperor's New Groove, it like I said, it's a phenomenon. In my opinion, it's a perfect movie. Like you helped create it, so I'm pretty sure you could see some of the flaws in it. Just like with me, when I cook for a living, I see the flaw in every single dish I put up. Shit, I should have added X, Y, and Z. I'm pretty sure you guys think the same thing. You're like, fuck, man, we could have done a little bit, maybe a little bit more red in this, shit like that, man. We always see.
For me, it's always about, I see a scene, I go, could have done it that way. Should have done it that way. That didn't work quite well. Should have added a few more in betweens in there. I should have done this. I should have done. I wish I could fix it now. It's the same thing. A lot of my films I worked on are like that. The only one that's not like that is Pocahontas.
How come?
Well, first of all, I had an amazing cleanup artist on it. Guy named Dave Nethery, and he controlled that. He saved a lot of shots that were that may not have worked as well. He really worked, tried to make sure that everything worked in cleanup, and maybe some of the shots were a little too rough. He, as he cleaned it up, and he would follow through and all that. I had some really good cleanup artists on my stuff. Dave Nethery is one. Cal LeDuc, who did a lot of my characters. We worked together on a lot of films. He did amazing stuff. Really helps Ed Gutierrez and Bill Berg and some of these guys that did work with Glenn and people like that. Having a good cleanup lead, really, that you work well with, really helps your stuff. Because you're not perfect. You do things, and then you look at it and you go, I need to fix that. And so you go back in, and they'll allow you to fix certain things, and you can adjust certain things, and then give it back to them, and they'll tie it and clean it all up for you, that there's corrections and stuff like that. But with the Meko, it was Dave, and it was also Brian Ferguson, who was the lead on Panic, on Hercules, but on Meko, he was on the Meko unit. I gave him huge sections to do, and he's a great animator. And I had a couple other people on there as well. And I look at that, and it's all the Meko stuff looks really solid to me. There's not a lot of stuff where I go, oh, I wish I could redo that again. That's probably the only one. Even Hades, there are scenes where I'm like, and they're not necessarily mine either. But there are just some I had to let go because I didn't have the time, and a lot of the scenes, same with Beauty and the Beast, even Emperor's New Groove, there's some scenes in there where I watch it now and I think, man, a lot of it had to do with overlapping action and things like that. Some people would animate the character and not move the fur, and it drove me nuts because this is Disney. You move the fur, that's what makes it. That's what gives it that Disney quality. You don't just treat it like, Fred's suit, for Flintstone suit or something. You know what I mean? It's like it's where the legs walk underneath it. It's not the way it works. This is Disney animation, right? So I constantly had to like push them. It's like, will you remember your secondary actions and remember your follow through on your stuff, on your clothing, on the earrings and all that stuff, the swinging of them. They just don't. They're not glued to a side of his face. Things like that. It was a constant battle on that because people are always focused on the primary animation and they ignore it. I mean, Hades was a huge one for that because everything, all this cloth and drapery and stuff like that. Ugh, that stuff. And then don't get me started on Charlotte, just ballroom dress with the chiffon and the earrings and the hair and the things and the puffs and it's just several passes through each of those characters just to get all that follow through and all that overlap taken care of, just because it's Disney.
Yeah. Now I wanted to ask you a question, and then we'll get right to the fans' questions. Now, I've only just started realizing this, and I'm going to try to draw, whenever I have you guys on, I try to draw a correlation to what you guys do to what I do. That way, when you see yourself in a character, you like, oh, I can feel for that character a little bit more. So when I can kind of do that with what you guys do for a profession, I try to. Now, this might be complete like bullshit thinking. However, I'm going to ask this question nonetheless. When I was listening to that story, what I got from that is the same thing I get when I look at cooking, right? So the places that I used to eat when I was a lot younger, before I'm not a master of my craft. Not saying that, because I think just with cooking and with your profession as well, a lot of you guys don't see yourselves as you're students still. Nobody's a master. You're a student. You're always learning. The day you stop learning is the day you die, right? So with that being said, I sit here and I think about these memories that I have when I was 16, 15. I would go to these restaurants that I absolutely loved. And I'm lucky enough to have a couple of those restaurants still around from 16 years ago, right? And I go back and I eat their food. Everything's the same. The menu's the same. The food's the same. The staff is the same. It's family run. With the exception of one place that I like to go, which is the Greek Village in Lake Mary, Florida. Every place that I've grown up with, I go in there and I'm like, man, this food I don't want to say it sucks, but it's not as good as I remember. I was like, what was that? Was that me? Is that me reminiscing about a time that I look back so fondly on, right? And I think about the smells, the tastes, the first time I had the Chinese food at my local spot that I still go to whenever I want shit Chinese food. Am I reminiscing about the time that I first had it, where you're chasing that dragon in a sense? Or is it the perspective that I've grown with all the food that I've made, all the times that I've fucked up making food, all the amazing food I've had at restaurants in different countries and different cities and different people, where it's broadened my perspective, right? So with that logic that I just laid out there, do you look at it that way, or were you looking at it that way back then when you guys were making this movie? If that makes any sense whatsoever, I hope it does.
Make it.
I guess what I'm getting at it, do you feel like you can look at the movie and the issues you see now? Is that something that you think you would have saw back then? Or is this thinking hindsight always being 2020, if you will? Long story short, hindsight being 2020. Do you see it more now? Or do you think you would have seen the same issues that you just described back then?
I would totally see it. I totally see it as growing in your craft. There are even scenes that I thought were really good that I did when I first did them, that I look at now and I'm like, I could do that. I could redo that better.
Yeah.
I think I know what I did wrong. I know why it's stilted, or this didn't work quite what I hoped it would, and I wish I could go back and fix it. There are some where I didn't realize that it needed fixing until I saw it in color, and that's just like technical issues where there's a scene in Beauty and the Beast with Lumiere as he comes in and dusts Cogsworth's salt off Cogsworth's head during Be Our Guest, and there's a optical illusion where his head comes in, and then his hand follows, and the head is the same shape as the hand because they're both candles, and it looks like a jump because your eye goes to the object that's closest to it, and I didn't think about that when I was drawing it in line. But then when it was filled in, it's jumped to me, and I'm like, crap. And I wanted to fix it. I've always wanted to fix it, and it's they won't let me. They never, even when they did the redo in 98, they wouldn't. I said, can I go back? No. Okay, just ask again if I could just fix
As soon
that.
as we're done with this chat, I'm going to go back and watch that movie, and I'm going to look for that scene because I've never noticed. I love when you guys point this stuff out. Did you ever watch the first Ninja Turtles movie, the live action one that Jim Henson did for the suits back in 1990?
No. Yes, I did.
Okay, so there's a couple scenes in that movie, and I did not notice it until I started talking to people that worked on this movie. There were scenes where they would tell me either on camera, off camera, like, oh yeah, in this scene where he's skateboarding up in the sewers, the guy that's doing the skateboarding, he's not wearing a glove. I think it's on his left hand. And he was like, so you see all turtle suit, and then you see a human hand. And then he was also saying there's a scene where they're all in the bathroom, and then Raph is just starting to come out of his coma after having the shit beat out of him. And Donatello throws his head back and he's laughing, and then you see another mouth, the actor's mouth, laughing inside the turtle suit. It's fucking haunting. It looks like the turtle ate somebody. So when you guys point out stuff, and I had Aaron Blaze on a few months ago, phenomenal person, dude. He was so fun to talk to. I can't wait to talk to him again as well. But he said the same thing you said. We could not stay on model for Beauty and the Beast, man. It was this. He was like, if you go back and look, and I was like, dude, I never fucking noticed. And he was like, really? And I was like, dude, I'm being 100% serious with you. I sit down and I watch these movies. Like sometimes I want to get introspective, and sometimes I want to look deeper into these characters. When, like, why is he or she doing this when he should be doing this? What are they thinking about to drive whatever action it is they're trying to do? What is that fucking motive that they got behind them?
There are like 4 different bells in that movie.
That's what he said, and I believe Tom told me that same story as well, where he's like, we just couldn't stay. He was like, there's 4 bells. I believe it was Tom Cito. But when you guys tell me this stuff, I love going back to look, because I just sit on the couch and I sit back and I reminisce. I enjoy being fucking 8 years old again. I'd be 4 years old, whatever it is, whatever age I was when I first saw these movies. I love it. It's something like that scene in Ratatouille, right? Where Ego's sitting there, he's eating it, right? And then he eats the Ratatouille at the end of the movie. And then he drops the fork and he gets transported back in time. Not only is that
that's a great rating.
Oh man, Ratatouille was like the final nail in the coffin to push me into cooking. Emerald Lagasse was a major one, but seeing Ratatouille, I was like, fuck, dude, I got to do this. But anybody can cook is what Gusto said. But when Ego drops that fork, that is the memory. That is what every cook chases. I don't give a fuck what any cook says. There's not a cook out there. Maybe if you work, it's not a dig at McDonald's, but maybe if you're a 16-year-old, you work at McDonald's, you're just flipping burgers because you need some extra money to buy some shit. Maybe you're not really chasing that dream. You're just trying to get some fucking money, right? But for anybody that takes it as a serious profession, right? That's what you chase as a cook. That is the whole goal, to say, I absolutely loved this without saying I absolutely loved this. Right. So when I watch you guys' movies, that's what I feel. I feel that same sense of me being a little kid, watching this with my friends, or watching this with my aunts and uncles and my grandparents that are no longer here. My mom taking to me these movies when I was a little kid. That's what I flash back to when I see this. So I don't see the mistakes you guys see. I see the perfection.
And also, tastes change and things like that. You were talking about, is it crap or is it, just my memory of it, or was it crap back then? And I mean, it's the same thing as when I was a kid. I used to buy Captain Crunch and Crunch Berries. I'd separate them in different bowls. I'd eat all the Captain Crunch every day, and until it was gone. And then I'd have a big bowl of Crunch Berries. It was the best, right? I can't even look at that stuff now. I don't know if the amount of sugar they put in is changed.
Oh, I'm still eating the hell out of it
because they changed it to high fructose corn syrup or whatever. I don't know what, but maybe it's different now. But at the time, I could eat a ton of it. It was delicious. But now, I can't even look at that stuff. But
I love Captain Crunch. I love Captain Crunch.
but the thing is that it's the same thing. It's like people said, well, what's your favorite movies growing up? Name me some of your favorite animated movies, right? And what's your guilty pleasure? And my guilty pleasure is Man Called Flintstone.
Oh, that's such a good one. I love that one.
And the interesting thing is that when you watch it, you realize that, yeah, it wasn't like at least Hey There, It's Yogi Bear had ink cells, and there was an attempt to make it look good. But Man Called Flintstone was pretty much grease pencil on cell.
It was something charming about it, though. It was.
I
enjoyed the hell out of it.
I agree, but technically, it wasn't
yeah.
like an amazing thing. But that movie, for some reason, I love the Flintstones anyway. It's one of my favorite series. There's no continuity in it.
Didn't need it. It was perfect.
There's some bad episodes and all that, but overall, the performances were solid. The voice talent was amazing, and some of the artists who worked on Tom and Jerry's in the 40s, they did a lot of scenes that there's so many different Freds in there. Some are amazing. You could tell a Ken Muse Fred from a whatever. You just certain way they drew them, and Alan Reed as the voice of Fred and all that. I love that series. But that movie, for some reason, and I know people, I criticize American Tail, and maybe people say, oh, what about the songs in Man Called Flintstone? It's like, I don't care what you say. I like those songs. They're great. And the guy who wrote them, he wrote a lot of the stuff for the Cafe Freeling too. He was Doug Goodwin. He wrote a lot of the theme songs and stuff for the Patty Freeland shows and things like that. Love that stuff. You
said Doug Goodwin?
Yeah.
I'm gonna look that name up.
But he was one of the writers on Man Called Flintstone and things like that. But I mean, I say that because I'm into soundtracks and TV soundtracks and television themes and things like that. I'm very into that stuff. I have a massive collection. I look at it and it's not perfect, but I still like it. Now that's not to say that everything I liked as a child I still have a fondness for. I remember as a kid, I loved was it Dastardly and Muttley and Their Flying Machines, or Stop That Pigeon, right? And I remember as a kid watching that every Saturday morning. I loved it with my big bowl of crunchy berries, whatever. So I saw it. It was the series. It was on. They sold it on DVD, right? So I'm like, oh, I gotta get this. So I bought it. I put it in. I watched like 3 episodes. My kids watched it with me. They watched. They were young too. They were like 8, 9, 10, or something like that. They watched the first episode. By the 3rd episode, they were gone. Right? It didn't hold their interest at all.
Did all 3 stay for all 3 episodes, or was it like one episode, one would leave, another one, the other one?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, but what I discovered is it was crap. It was crap. It was crap. I was like, I couldn't. And the jokes and the humor was lame. And then you look at the credits and you see stories written by Mike Maltese. I'm like, oh man, there's somebody who did it for money. I'm like, wow, this stuff is so bad. Jokes like I'm going to the barn dance tonight, and you cut to a barn with legs dance. And it's like, I turned it off, packaged it up, sold it on eBay the next day. I never looked back. I was just like, wow. I don't know why I liked it as a kid, but I did, but some things don't age well. This is the difference, because this is why, people who grew up in the 90s watching things like Powerpuff Girls, those shows, they're still excellent, that stuff was amazing, you know.
Craig's a master at what he
we
does,
never
man.
had stuff like that in the 70s. It was just, you know, churning it out, chopping it out, and sending it. You know, lame jokes, lame whatever. You know, it was just get it done. And
Yeah.
so there wasn't the quality wasn't there. You know, the best stuff on Saturday morning was the stuff from the 40s, classic Warner stuff. You know, that's why I was so into it, because the current stuff, even though it had all the fancy bells and whistles like space and travels and all this stuff, then
Had no
you know,
substance.
yeah, no substance. It's like today's version of clickbait.
Yeah.
You know, the Impossibles, Frankenstein Jr. Like, come
Whoa,
on,
whoa,
you know,
whoa,
watch
whoa,
it.
whoa, whoa, Nick, hold on. I love Frankenstein Jr. now. I love because there was
No, you don't understand. I do too. I haven't even seen that stuff, but if you look at it, it's not. It's cool, but they could do so much more with it. They could
they
have, you
really
know,
can. But
the
let me
writing wasn't there, and the quality wasn't there. You know, it lacks something. You had a good premise, but you didn't know how to use it. And then, to be fair, you know, standards and practices, probably there's certain things they
Yeah.
wouldn't allow you to do
Oh,
back
they
then.
axed the hell out of it.
I
Yeah.
mean, exactly. If you watch, you know, some of the 90s Animaniacs and some of the 90s, and even they didn't, they hit and miss a lot too, you know.
Mhm.
But at least there was an attempt to recreate that sort of Warner Brothers shorts of the
Yes.
40s and 50s. They put that into their cartoons because they knew that it wasn't only kids that were watching it. You know, I think in the 70s they realized that it was just, you know, kiddie fodder. I don't
Mhm.
think they thought, oh, parents are going to be watching this along with their kids, so we better put something in there for them. You know, I guess the closest thing you could maybe Star Trek the animated series, but you know, other than that, the rest of it, the stuff from Hanna-Barbera and things, you know, the closest thing I could say is maybe the first one or two seasons of Scooby-Doo. They tried a little bit with Shaggy and Scooby and things like that, but other than that, the rest of that stuff that they put in, you know, the rest of the series that they made throughout the 70s, you know, the stuff in the 60s was a little better. Like I said, you know, Frankenstein Jr. and the Impossibles were one of my favorite shows as a kid. So, but again, if you watch it now, it's still, you know, still there's stuff missing.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you smoke weed, Nick?
No.
Okay, so that's probably why. Like, see me, I have this thing where I'm the best fan, but also the shittiest fan. If I go in there, right? So if we go in and watch the same movie, we sit and watch the same cartoon. Obviously, we're gonna have differing opinions. However, if I can go in there and be transported away, like if you can buy me in, right? If I can suspend disbelief, and I can sit back and think Frankenstein Jr. is out here fighting monsters, and he's a superhero right now.
Yeah.
I'm happy. I'm sold. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be the worst movie in the world. Like, but if I can sit there and I'd be like, oh, I get why this character's doing this. I understand what this director, this writer, this animator was doing. I get it.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
I'm the worst. Like I said, I'm the worst fan. If I can just suspend disbelief, I'm happy. I'm sold. It doesn't matter if it's shit or if it's good. It's just, I don't know. I'm just that weird.
But you know, but again, it's the same thing. It's like Powerpuff Girls. They fight monsters too.
Mhm.
But there's things that they do where you go, this is brilliant. You know?
Oh yeah, there's levels to this shit for sure.
I mean, one of the first shows I saw of the Powerpuff Girls, I didn't even watch the show, but I think the kids had it on one day or something. I saw something. My brother is a big fan, and he said you should watch this. And so I turned on one episode, and it was a brilliant episode where it was about the Tooth Fairy. You know.
Yes.
And it's like, that's great. Yeah, it's super violent in a way, but it was knocking out teeth to get money. I just think that's great. What a great concept. That's a thing that, you know, Frankenstein Jr. fighting monsters compared with Powerpuff Girls fighting monsters. I mean, the added thing is the entertainment value. You know, you got good writing. You know, and to me, that's why the Warner stuff shined to me, because it was good animation,
yes,
good character, good voices, but the writing was
Perfect.
fantastic too. You know, yeah, they had some stinkers, but for the most part, that's, you know, that's why I like Chuck Jones. A lot of his stuff, most of his stuff was spot on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he and Maltese, even his stuff in the 40s wasn't as good as his late 40s, early 50s, mid 50s stuff when he and Maltese were a team.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, amazing, really solid works of art as far as I'm concerned, as far as, you know, writing and visuals and all that as well.
I love the Coyote and the Roadrunner, man. That area you're talking about fucking knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I there's a thing in Roger Rabbit where I did an homage to Chuck Jones.
Yeah.
Where my big scene in Roger Rabbit where he says, "Don't anybody move. All right, June, reach the sky, or let the judge have it, or all right, Weasels, or whatever." Roger, oh yes, it's me, my dear. So when he leaps over, he does this sort of Chuck Jones pose.
That is so cool.
That's my tribute to Chuck Jones. And yeah, and so you know, that scene took me a month to do because I had to do all the characters in it. It's just so long, so much work. And
did you ever get to tell him that story?
Did I ever? I don't know if I did. When I worked with Chuck, it was on a film called Chariots of Fur. It was like 95. And I was like over the moon. Well, first of all, my name in the film, in the credits, it's spelled backwards. Of course, Chuck made me, you know, made me mad at him because he changed it. I wrote it out, my name backwards. I put Irene Arkin, right? That's my name backwards, right? And he changed it to Irene. I'm like, crap, just put it the way I wrote it. I would, you know, what if I change your name to Chuck Jones? I mean, would you like that? No, you wouldn't. Just put it the way. He says, oh, they're going to find out. No one's going to find out. No one cares. Just put it the way it was supposed to, what I put it in. But anyways, you know, despite that, the first day I went in, because he wanted to pitch the scene to me, I went in, it was freelance. I was still working at Disney at the time. I think it was early on before Pocahontas really got going. So we had downtime. So I wanted to work with Chuck Jones. This was my only chance. So I went over to the place where he was at. It was at the old Warner studio lot there. And I'm in his office and he says, he's sitting down, he's going through it. And so, well, in this scene, the Roadrunner. And I'm like, yeah. But in my mind, I'm going, it's Chuck Jones. I didn't even hear a word he said. Thankfully, the scene got cut and he gave me another one that was a scene with a huge mouse in it or whatever. But but I was so over the moon that I was actually getting pitched a scene by Chuck Jones, you know, and it was of a coyote, you know. It blew my mind. And at the end, I had a scene of Cell. It was what was it? It was a Bugs Bunny Cell from Bully for Bugs, original.
Yeah.
Bully for Bugs. Cell, and I had him sign it to me, and he says, "Well, don't tell Linda. She wouldn't want me to do it, but I'll do it." So he signed it to me and all that stuff. So I have actually two cells. He visited Pocahontas early on. He visited the studio, and I knew he was coming, so I brought in a Daffy Duck cell from Robin Hood Daffy with the
such a good one,
right?
Yeah.
So I had a cell of that, and I got him to sign that. So I have two signed Chuck Jones cells of both, one Daffy and the other Bugs, and it's just that is great. Unfortunately, I signed him with a black Sharpie, and that stuff fades in time. So should have had him sign it with a blue Sharpie. Those don't fade as much. But anyway, but yeah, I didn't really talk to him all that much. You don't know what to say when you're talking to people like that. You start getting tongue-tied and you sound like a jabbering idiot. And so you have all these questions you want to ask, but you don't know how to ask them. So you know, it's the same thing. A lot of certain people were my heroes growing up, and I always wanted to meet them, and I I got to meet the people that I really admired that growing up, and Chuck Jones was one of them. So met him several times, and I got a bunch of things signed. And I have his book, Chuck
Chuck
Amok or
yeah.
whatever. A friend of mine named Charles Solomon, Chuck said he wanted to meet some of the animators who worked on Little Mermaid after it was done, right? And so he invited me, Andreas, Duncan, and one other person I can't remember, down to meet Chuck Jones at his place. And so I said, yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, it'd be great. And so we spent the afternoon with Chuck Jones, at his home.
So cool.
And he wrote in my book, loved your work, admiringly, Chuck Jones. I was like, this is great. So there's plenty of times that I met him. He was just, it was amazing to work with somebody that inspired you all those years ago. That was an amazing experience. Yeah.
It's always fun to hear you guys fan out like I fan out when I get to talk to you guys. Like I said, it's really cool to get to see, because just for a second there I saw Nick at 12 years old watching these cartoons. I saw him at 15 years old when he wanted to take this more serious, and then he's in this animation game, he's chasing these heroes, he's chasing these idols. Now he's on that same level, and there's people that look at you the same way you look at Chuck, and the same way Chuck looked at who he looked up to. And just it's fascinating to see the lineage of fans, right? Yeah. And as we go through this chat, I've gotten to learn a lot from you that I didn't get to see in many of the interviews that I've seen on you, or any of the articles that I've read, or anything that's out there. Whenever I try to do a little bit of research on you guys, try to go and read anything or watch anything that you guys have done. Yeah. So getting to see and hear some of these stories tonight have been real fun. What we're going to do is, because I did not mean to keep you for 2 hours, it's almost 11 o'clock.
You want to do some of the questions for quickly?
What we'll do is I'll do the standard 3 because they won't take much thought. And since we're going to do a part 2, I'll save all of these questions because I took pictures of all of them. I usually write them down, but with somebody hitting my mailbox tonight and taking care of that shit, I didn't have time to write all these down. All right. So I'll save these questions, and what we'll do is we'll bookend this one and say to be continued, and then we'll put all the fans' questions, and I'll put out another social media thread, and we'll get some more, and then we'll do all those fans' questions in the second part. But the 3 that I always ask, man, the first one is I pre-gamed you on the first 2 actually. So 2 books on animation that you would recommend. It doesn't have to be animation, it could be an illustration book, or Charles Schulz. I'm a huge Charles Schulz fan, so he's come up quite a few times, so people say his art books and stuff like that. But what are 2 books that you think every animator or every fan of animation should have on their shelves?
Oh, every fan of animation. Well, I mean,
fan or somebody that works in the industry.
It's a cliche to say illusion of life.
It comes up.
Yeah, that is a huge thing. That's like a wealth of Disney animation knowledge in that. And then, of course, Dick Williams. Yeah, Dick Williams' book and Eric Goldberg's book. Both of those, Animation Crash Course and the
Survival Guide.
Survival Guide, yeah. Those 2. It's so funny. People always ask me. I've had a couple. One person at a convention? Somebody said, "I represent a bookseller. Would you be interested in doing a book?" And my idea of a book would be doing my time at Disney. But that's not what they meant. They meant a book on technical things, animation. And all I can think about is, you want me to write down all my bad habits? It's like, I don't think that's going to help anybody. I'm so left-handed. I flip and I draw with the same hand. I don't do this. I don't draw and flip. I draw and then I put the pencil down and I flip like this, and then I put so my right hand is just basically a paperweight most times. So, things like that. I don't do thumbnails really. Count on my hands, on my fingers, one hand the amount of time I did thumbnails in the past. I started to do them and on Mermaid, and I just it didn't work. What I usually do is I do a scribble pass, and some of those are on my Facebook page, the Nik Ranieri animator page. It has all those pencil tests and things like that, and some of them I kept the roughs for, so you see stages of the animation of the scenes and how they start out and how ugly they are. But again, it was one of those things where I needed to explore and not worry about model. I needed to explore performance and attitude and not worry about how beautiful these drawings are. And I needed to get them in front of the directors ASAP. So I would do these scribble tests and and no matter how many times I did them, I always had to explain to the directors every single movie. You know, this is just a way for me to get it in front of you and we can talk about it. Do you like the direction it's going? Do you like the ideas that I have in it? Do you like the performance? You know, and I remember I worked with Ron and John so many times, you know, and it's still, I would do scribble passes for them and they get to know me and get to know the way I work. But then of course, Hercules rolls around and I do my first scribble pass on Hades. And John looks at me and goes, now, this is going to be drawn better, right? I was like, yes, John, yes. I do a scribble pass so I can get it in front of you within a day or two so I don't waste my time doing long, beautiful drawings that you're going, no, I didn't like that direction that you did on this character. Do it again. You know, I don't have time for that stuff. So yeah, I'm going to draw it out, tie it down. That's where it
work smarter, not harder, is what I'm hearing.
So I mean, there are some things I just don't know if it fit in a book. So so as far as animation books goes, there are people who have done it a lot better than I have. And like I said, Dick Williams and I mean, I learned a lot from both of those guys, Dick and Eric. And then Illusion of Life, yeah, I you know, read through that when I first got it in 1980 or whenever it first came out. We didn't have anything like that when I was first starting out. My big goal was to find a copy of the Fleischer story, and that didn't even have or Tex Avery, King of Cartoons. And that didn't even have animation theory. It just had, it was just a sort of a fan book based on Tex Avery and the Fleischer Studios and stuff like that. But there's very little. Maybe the other thing was the Walter Foster books, the Preston Blair books, those things. That was all we basically had early on to work out, you know, certain concepts of animation and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, those things. I mean, nowadays there's so much.
Yeah,
so much.
YouTube alone, there's so much.
Well, yeah. You know, it's so funny because I started out. I mean, I did my first film when I was still in just graduated high school. This was late '70s, and I took a course, not an animation course, but art fundamentals course at Sheridan College, and I flunked out of it because, you know, art fundamentals had all these dumb courses, textiles and things I had no interest in. I just wanted to get in the animation program. They wouldn't let me in. They said, take art fundamentals. I took it. I bombed out. In that interim, the year that I was off, I sat down and I animated my own film. Now, it was very crude, you know, but I painted all the cells and all that. Nowadays, man, I wish I had the technology back then. It was just amazing. You know, every single drawing I had to be painted and put onto cell and traced and all that stuff back then. I still have pictures of me lining my bed with, you know, cells to dry them with. Nowadays, you got an animation studio in a box, Harmony or TV Paint or whatever. Man, the things I could have done back then with that type of technology, people now, just YouTube is full of people's personal animation projects. If you've got the drive to put out that much, you can do it. I mean, you know, my daughter's actually doing some of that now. It's not full animation. It's just sort of posing and sort of like a animatics style, but
That's really
you know,
cool though.
you know, she's doing it, and so that's but yeah, there's a lot of material out there for animators to be inspired by and all that, and yeah, and you can, yeah, YouTube, you can even go frame by frame, you know, it's great.
Yep. It
So yeah.
really is. It's in your hands, ladies and gentlemen. You can go as far as you want to. Just got to put in the work. This next question is how we're actually talking, because I asked Sandra this question. Animation recommendation. If you had fun on the show, who do you think would also have fun on this show? I brought that up with Sandro, and Sandra's like, have you had Nik Ranieri? And I was like, I have not. He was like, you need Nik and you need Joe. So who would you recommend?
I could recommend, you talking with Tony Bancroft?
I've they were wrapped up in Mermaid, excuse me. I got to reach back out to them because their podcast, have you done, I want to say I've heard you on their podcast. Yeah, I know I have. Because when I started deep diving in 2020, I think I went back and listened to almost their entire back catalog. So I've been talking with Tom and Tony, and ladies and gentlemen, the Bancroft Brothers podcast is phenomenal. You guys got to check that one out. So yeah, I've talked to them. I got to reach back out and see if they still want to come on. But yeah, Tom and Tony are for sure on that list of people I would love to have on.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think like who. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not even sure who you've had on so far.
Oh, quite a few people here, Nik. But I'll let you think about it, and then I'll reach back out and see who I should reach out to. But this one is always one of my favorite questions, and it's interesting to see because I usually write down at least one name. There's not been one Mount Rushmore of animators, influencers, anybody that's inspired you throughout your entire career. And we've already heard one name pretty prominent, and that was Chuck Jones, man. So I got to imagine he's on your Mount Rushmore. But who would you say? Now, I always give people 4 because Mount Rushmore, you got 4 of them, but you also get an honorable mention, so +1. So who's your 4 and your +1? Animators, influencers. I've heard somebody say Van Halen on here. I don't know if you work with him, John Sanford. I had John on not too long ago, and he's like, it's going to sound weird, but Van Halen was on my Mount Rushmore. So it doesn't have to be strictly animators.
Oh, okay. I can say, like I said, the people I've met, Chuck Jones, definitely, right?
Yeah.
Al Hirschfeld.
Okay.
So I actually went to visit Al Hirschfeld at his famous red brick apartment in New York City. Do you know who that is?
That name sounds really familiar.
Okay. Where is it? Where is it? You know, you can never grab it when you want it. There it is. Al Hirschfeld.
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
Al Hirschfeld would do like caricatures.
I have seen this. Yes.
So he was a huge influence, and I can't get to that right now. But sorry, I'm off the line there.
Oh, you're perfectly fine.
But yeah, so yeah, and he would, he signed a bunch of stuff to me and books to me and things like that. He actually did my caricature.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I went to New York, and that's on my page as well. He did a caricature of me, and yeah, I paid him, but it was an opportunity. When he visited for Aladdin, if you look at what Eric did on Fantasia 2, the the jazz
Yeah.
section. That's all based on Hirschfeld art.
Really? I wonder
Yeah.
if that's where I've heard that name then, because I've
Yeah.
watched a lot of videos with Eric, so that might have been it, or it might have come up quite a few
He
times.
said the genie was based on that.
Yeah.
In fact, Hirschfeld's drawing of Maurice Chevalier, it was my inspiration for Lumiere.
Really?
I used certain aspects of that. In fact, if you look in the Aladdin book, I'm gonna go away again. If I can find this stupid thing. Where is it? Get in there it is. This, it's in here because Eric used it as an example of the genie, and it's so funny because the genie is the where is it? Here it is. Genie. There it is. This is the thing he talks about. This is an example of Hirschfeld's drawing for the, and he said, "Oh, this is for." But if you look close, you look close to the face. It's Lumiere. That's what I used for the profile of Lumiere. The lip sticking out and everything. The lip curving in. That's a Lumiere. That's I use that as a reference and as inspiration for the design on Lumiere. So he was a huge influence. His caricatures, him. I mean, you know, Mort Drucker as well, who I also got to meet at a convention once, and he's the Mad Magazine caricaturist and stuff. So, so yeah, Al Hirschfeld would be the other one. And it, you know, Aaron mentioned, was it Aaron who mentioned Van Halen? The other person,
John Sanford mentioned.
John Sanford. Okay. The other person I wanted to meet, also music is let's see. Oh, it's too far up to go. He's a performer, Mike Nesmith. And he was one of the Monkees.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I got to meet him. A huge fan of his work throughout the 70s and 80s and 90s and all that. And so 2019, he just died recently, but 2019, I got to meet him and stuff like that. So that was another one that inspired me. I got to meet Dick Van Dyke. That was another one. Unfortunately, I was 10 years too late because I just wanted to talk to him about comedy, about timing and stuff like that. When I finally got to meet him, he's not as sharp as he was. You know, I thought I probably would have had a better conversation with him had it been 10 years earlier. I think he would have been sharper. It's, you know, it was kind of like, you know, talking to Joe Biden, you know, it was, don't want to get political or anything, but you know what I mean? It's that type of thing where you're going, okay, you see videos of Dick Van Dyke in interviews and stuff like that, but that wasn't the person you met. Yeah. So it's like, I kind of really wish, you know, because he had such a way, pantomime about him, and it wasn't just in the stuff where he was performing, like in the Dick Van Dyke show. There were times when the character Rob Petrie would be asked to perform at parties or whatever, and he would, you know, do the drunken guy or whatever. I'm not even talking about that. That stuff's amazing because he was very rubbery and things like that. But just in the basic performance and his attitudes, he drank so much from his performance and the expression that he did, you know. And it's very inspiring. And I don't know, the way he performed the material. He was one of my favorite performers. Yeah, and I other than that, I mean, I guess I could say I got to meet Frank and Ollie and those guys. Yeah. And I got to, you know, work with Richard Williams, and there's so many, but honestly, um, there are very few that I remember being very impressed by when I was really young, and those were the ones that really stood out for me. So I don't know if I can give you a full five.
Oh, that's perfectly fine, because that list of people, we all draw inspirations from different. I draw inspiration for cooking from photography I see, and it's not even about food. I could just see a color of something, or I could see, a shape, or I can see something there, and I'm like, man, that would look really cool if it was done with duck and something here and something there. So I see that same, and I can draw that same correlation from damn near anything for a profession that
And it
they can
connects
go
with
ahead and,
certain people, that connect in with
yeah.
your likes. I mean, the same thing. I mean, I mentioned Mike Nesmith, right? The first film I did, I was telling you about when I took a break from school. I took one of his songs and I animated it.
Yeah.
So it was a big part of my mindset. It's the stuff I really liked. I wanted to apply it to the craft that I had,
Yeah.
and things like that. So yeah, it was. It's all that stuff. Inspiration is piled into to what eventually comes out, and you use in certain situations. Like I said, I mean, Don Knotts used a bit of that, used a bit of different things. I just
It's a melting pot of pop culture.
Well, yeah. I was a TV kid. I grew up. We moved so many times. After 1968, we were in the same house from time I was born till 1968, which was 7 years there. I had friends. I would never be inside, never watch TV. I would always be out with my friends, hanging out. And then we moved, and I didn't know anybody, so TV was my friend. And then before I got used to where I was, we move again, and we kept moving every couple of years. And so yeah, I became a TV kid, and that's basically that's where my sensibilities and my the comedy influences, the things like that. That's where that came from, and that's the stuff I drew upon when I would approach a scene. Like, what can I do what makes me laugh? What appeals to me? How would I perform that expression or that piece of dialogue? That's why I when I first started in the industry, I worked on some show called The Raccoons, and weren't the best vocal performances. So it wasn't really inspiring. That's one of the reasons I want to get to Disney and or work on some of these Hollywood productions, because they get the top talent to voice. I mean, they get well written material, and they get really good performances out of them, because a lot of them are professional actors, and you get stunning performances that just pretty much, I mean, people tell me how much they like Hades and all that, and my feeling was, I just listened to James Woods' vocal performances, and my goal is don't screw it up. It's right there, just make sure that you don't screw it up. It's just the inspiration is there. So
is that the name of your book? Don't Screw It Up?
Yeah, it should be.
So, well, Nik, man, this has been an absolute blast, man. I can't wait to do it again for a part 2. And for sure, we'll definitely go pretty deep on Hades, and we're for sure going to go a lot deeper than we did on Emperor's New Groove. Like I said, I always love when I have a guest on that not only is willing to talk to me, because it's never fun trying to talk to somebody that doesn't want to talk to you, but you're very open, you're very forthcoming with your stories. I absolutely love this conversation. It was really cool to just sit here and geek out and listen to somebody that helped, like I said, the same thing that you were just talking about a second ago, helped mold the person you became. Your comedy, your sense of comedy, your sense of timing, your sense of humor, and your moralities, and all this other shit. The same thing was what you guys helped create. It helped mold me and shape me into the person I am. So without folks like you and folks like Eric and folks that I've talked to on this podcast, man, I don't really know what I'm into. I've got a lot of interests, but there's only one or two things, well, three things really. Cartoons, comic books, and the NBA that really have a deep hold in me. And a lot of the movies that you worked on, man, have got a deep hold on me. So like I said, I really appreciate this, man. Where can the fans go and say, hey, Nik, I loved that stuff you did? Or where can they find you on the social media?
Well, again, I mean, the Nik Ranieri animator page on Facebook is pretty much where I put my career down. So, it's all chronological. So if you go back to the posts from 2012, you can just go through, and basically what I do on that is I just post. I just talk about the scene that I have, and the posts always accompany some sort of image. So if I have a pencil test to show, I'll talk about working on that scene. If I have pictures of people in the studio, I'll talk about the people in the studio and what they worked on and things like that. Drawings, put a lot of drawings up, rough drawings, and talk about the designs of different characters and who did what to the best of my memory. So Nik Ranieri -animator, Facebook, you'll find a whole ton of stuff. It goes all the way up until the end of Princess and the Frog. I should talk about, I started to do it, 2019 hit, I got really busy, and then 2020 hit and all that stuff. And the real reason is that it's a hard thing to go and talk about the last remaining years at Disney. There's a lot of stuff that went down, and it's hard. I should write it down because while it's still fresh in my memory, I should write it down. It's just hard to sit down and do it because you get so busy, and it was not a great
tough time. Yeah, tough time for sure.
So I hope to eventually finish that story of Disney and maybe some other stuff that I did afterwards, and other projects. But that's pretty much there. And then through that, you can always post a note, or guess the DM on there,
the old messenger. Yeah.
So and that's pretty much right now. I should have a website. I'm procrastinating on putting it together, but one of these days I'll get to it. Probably when I retire, because I work 5, sometimes 6 days with overtime, and right now I'm on The Simpsons, so just doing that remotely, and it seems to be going well. That's got me. Here you go. It's got me one of these puppies.
Oh, that's a beauty.
It is. That was a shock. I didn't ever expect to win one of these. But it's a good gig.
Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy that we went almost 2 hours, right? And we only talked about The Simpsons at the very last. So I feel like that's going to be.
The reason is that the story's not quite over yet. So.
Oh, I know, but that just signed the next 14 parts we're going to have together, Nik. This is going to be an outstanding journey over the next 10 years. I'm really looking forward to it. But no, all joking aside, man, like I said, I really enjoyed this conversation. There's no way we end this other than, man, he's been Nik. I've been Julian. This is What's in My Head podcast. And this has been another piece of your childhood. Good night. My guest next week is the voice of Lemillion in My Hero Academia, Rico Fajardo. Enjoy the teaser.
It's not heroism isn't being without fear. It's making the choice.
Yes.
Making the choice in spite of. And so all that to say, I say that as a preamble to when he goes to save Ari. I get a lot of young kids, man, that approach me, and they're like, "I hate Ari. I hate that Muriel lost his quirk." Right? And it's always the same story. They're like, I think it's stupid. I think it's stupid that he yielded his power. And I get it, because when you watch, like you said, Naruto, You know, these shows where you want your character to become more powerful. You want them to have agency in the world. You want them to be able to kick the bad guy's fucking ass, right? Like you want them just to like destroy it. For Mirio, it's in him losing his quirk, even though it's saying he could have just let it go through. Bullet maybe would have hit Ari. What? It's her blood. Does it take away her quirk? I don't know. We don't know, right? All we know is that the guy who reads emotions says he's doing this for the girl. I'm going to shoot at the girl and he's going to take the bullet for the girl. He does so, predictably. All the villains, hooray, the invincible kid's not invincible anymore. And when he says you're powerless, Mirio straight up throws a Corono at Overhaul and says, you know, I'm not powerless. I'm still the million. Like literally the fight is still going, because it's not in a world where everyone bases your value on your quirk. That's what makes you special. You could say it's a metaphor for money, agency, whatever, education. Even without a quirk, Mirio knows what he's about. And he's trained, that support system, man. Like I said, supportive dad, his best friend Amajiku, who like thinks the world of him. Sir Night-Eye, not even mentioning the guy who can freaking look into your future and tell you with certainty, I know you're going to be amazing.